Bobby Kennedy's gravesite.
Remarkable.
Yeah, and we had a kid that was 20-something that said, "How did Bobby Kennedy die?"
He was a college student.
And it was like, excuse me, you know, I mean, they have no clue about our history, and it was just, it was.
They're not teaching history anymore.
I won't take up time, I have an even more ridiculous one than that. This was on a History Channel show recently. There was a kind of a crusty old general who was being interviewed for one of the, I think it may have been the military channel, anyway, it was a documentary. The context isn't that important. He spent a lot of his time going around to schools and talking to students. And he was being introduced by a teacher, a young teacher, as he put it, a young so-and-so. I'm sure he was thinking something other than what he said. I get the impression maybe mid-20s. And I can't remember the general's name even. Again, it's not that important. But the young teacher was introducing the general to his students. And he said, General so-and-so, he was a prominent figure in World War XI.
Oh my gosh.
As in,
That's hilarious.
prominent, and he was serious. This is a teacher. World War XI.
I'm going to write that one down. That's in the category of unbelievable.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
But I'm going to have to note here what the II stands
yeah,
for.
exactly.
11. Wow, that's pathetic. Well, as I think about another major area that I'd really like to work with, it's federal regulations. Because
Good luck with that.
yeah, I know. And it's going to be so difficult to go backwards on it, but there are probably some easier things that we could do going forward. I'd like to see bills, for instance, designate, like I was mentioning earlier, what is it that is new in what you're proposing here? A bill that you're going to sponsor. What is it that's new? Because sometimes it's not new, but it duplicates what is and either overlaps, conflicts, whatever. I did not know until I got into this how many excellent resources there are already on identifying the areas of overlap, the areas of conflicting things. So when people say, where do you start on this? Here's how I answer it now, which isn't quite the same way that I did a month ago before I found these outstanding resources, some of them even from the GAO, where who would think the government studies itself, right? But with
parties.
yeah, at parties where they have clowns, right? Clowns and mind readers. That could help.
You know, I think the overlapping is classic, and one of the things that's been bugging me for years is why do we have the Department of Agriculture with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management to do the same damn thing?
Yep.
But they'll have offices, well, when I was a kid here, Forest Service office was a little office out in the woods.
A cabin. Yeah.
Now you go by the one in Mackenzie and Willamette, there's these like mega hotels out there. And they've got more and more engineers singing. In fact, the Forest Service, I believe, used to make money for the government, and now it's costing money because they have so many regulations in the timber industry. And I would like to see those consolidated, get rid of half those engineers. All they're doing is building roads through most of the wilderness areas.
And more than half the bureaucrats too,
Yeah.
probably.
They figure that in the state of Oregon, there's 4 miles of road for every square mile of timber. So, you know, it's a lot of roads. And, you know, I see them up here now, they're plowing up a lot of them, but it's just crazy that way. And Wendy and I battle the Endangered Species Act quite a bit with the Oregon spotted butterfly and things. But in one in particular, I had some property listed down in the 10-mile area. They were 2-acre oceanfront parcels. It took me 2.5 years to go through the silver spotted,
Wow.
Oregon silver spotted butterfly habitat plan. And then when I got all through with this thing, they said, well, all you have to do is avoid the area where the nectar species are at. And they could have told me that to start with and save this thing. But I had over 140 emails with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on this thing, talking to them and working this thing out. The thing that I proposed to them, and this is pretty simple, I said, why don't you go around with a bag of seeds that there's 5 nectar species that feed this endangered animal. And if you go knock on some doors and tell people that they can build a habitat ring that will benefit them, give them the warm fuzzies, save the butterfly, we can get this thing done pretty easily. But when you make us conflicts with the landowner and the government, you're just making people unhappy about this. And I said, you know, here we're spending 2.5 years of high blood pressure over the owners and me and you and everything involved, when you could make us all partners in there to make things work. She said, well, we couldn't do that.
Oh, jeez.
And I said, you know, years back I was on the McKenzie River plan in Eugene. And it was the same thing. They had a bunch of regulations. They wanted to regulate the McKenzie River to where landowners didn't have any property rights. As realtors, we swore an oath to uphold private property rights. And I had just become a realtor at that time. I was also vice president of the chapter of Northwest Steelheaders. And I said, well, let's go out and tell these people, let's hand out a pamphlet telling them, well, the reason why we want to have a brush along the shoreline, protect the small fish and so on, rather than just make a regulation that they can't put up a satellite dish,
Absolutely.
they can't have a mobile home, they can't mow their yard, they can't use these. And they passed the McKenzie River Initiative, which banned all those things. And I resigned from that. It's the last thing to do with them. But anyway.
And I'd like to see what happens if they don't mow their lawn. I bet there's another fire regulation of some sort or whatever.
We can educate without regulating, is basically my point of the thing.
And that's the lesson to be learned, isn't it? So what I learned from this, education, not regulation, I want to write that down. That's another choice when like World War XI. I like that.
Given a choice, most property owners will make the right decision.
Yeah, yeah.
For the long-term thing. And they treat us like we're a bunch of imbeciles that are out battling them, like the spotted owl versus the loggers. The loggers don't want to kill the spotted owls. They just want to get along. They want to do their job. They want to.
Yeah, I've had several people say the same thing in a little bit different words, saying that the bureaucracies treated them with arrogance, in that they, as bureaucrats, knew the answer more because they were the experts and you aren't. So, but what I've learned out of this is that with all of the regulations that are in conflict and so many programs that are in conflict with each other, that you've got to have an impact in some way to just get started. And so what is that way for someone who would be like myself, new to Congress? I believe that you find out from the people sitting at this table and the other tables where we go, which ones are important to you. And that's where you start. Because it's one of those things where you can't take the whole elephant. You've got to start with what's important to the people that you're serving. So that's how I say that I would try to go, that I would go at it. Now, that's what I say. Now that I realize how well researched this already is, you know?
One thing about the government is they don't seem to people in business that they really want to work with you. They seem to want to make an enemy out of you, and I don't understand. There's so much that can be accomplished more if they would work with us and listen to our ideas, but instead they battle any idea that any of the people in business have to say. They want to battle
It's
it.
almost like they resent the fact that we're paying their paychecks.
I know. I don't
They're making
understand.
more money than we are.
You have like 3 different entities. You have an administration, and you have the 2 different parties, and you have the ideology of these different entities. And you have an ideology in our federal government today that is absolutely in the toilet. And when they're taking situations like the religious liberty, and they will not go in and speak to the leaders of the Catholic Church in this regard, and they make these rules and regulations and so forth, and then they come out and say that the Republican Party is against women, and then they turn around and they have Julianne in her little thing today now, this little chart of this woman that goes through life being fed by the government. And how wonderful, she doesn't have a husband or anything like this, and she doesn't have great jobs and so forth, but she's being taken care of, and it's quite embarrassing, I think, for women for what they've done with that thing. If you haven't seen it,
I think it's quite embarrassing for the American people.
for the American people and for women.
Because we're self-sufficient, and they're trying to say that they have to do everything, and
My point is here, Karen, is that these are just, we're talking about, you know, the schools, or we're talking Department of Education, or, you know, some of these areas that there needs to be problems. There has to be an overall change.
Yes.
There has to be an overall change. And so you
Definitely.
can't just attack one or two.
Right.
You've got to attack the whole thing, and we need to make a complete change in government, is what we need to do.
You
Because
bet.
if we don't, we are heading, you know, I have just recently read a book on Germany, you know, its aspects of Germany when they moved into the Netherlands, and how they just wiped out people's liberties, just hand and fist, and then just ended up taking them to Auschwitz and just gassing them. I mean, just wholesale, these wonderful people. And in Mexico, you look at the revolution in Mexico, most Mexicans don't even know anything about it. But it was a horrible situation that existed there. And we're heading in the same direction. When we have a president that's going to make the decisions that he has made against the Catholic Church, the only ones he consults are the people in the Catholic Church that are the rebels in the Catholic Church. Those are the only ones he views and talks and takes their advice. And then tells the bishops and the cardinals, why don't you listen to them? Well, that's kind of ridiculous.
there's a wonderful little book out there, it's called How to Kill 11 Million People. I don't know if anybody's read it. It takes about 15 minutes to read it, and the way you do it is you lie to them, and that's exactly what we're getting
Yep.
right now,
Yep,
is we're
yep,
being
yep.
totally lied to.
Yeah.
And when you read this book, it's an eye-opening experience to read it, because it talks about the Holocaust victims, and they had, in their ghettos, they had like 15 Germans that oversaw the whole ghetto. And these people trusted what they were telling them.
Yep.
The
And,
government
and,
program.
and they
Yeah.
took them right in
Yeah,
and
yeah, and
killed
they
them.
took
March
away,
and March,
yeah.
Yeah.
They all you do
And
is get
so
up.
it's
So,
just like,
and
we are
we're
being
seeing
lied
the
to
same
and
thing
sick of
happening
it.
to us in America.
Right
We're getting
now.
the same thing in America, and it's going to get worse if we don't do something about
And
it.
you've given us the big picture. And then if we take it to the next level, I'd like to pull in your comment there. What happened to the attitude that entrepreneurs are good?
Oh,
What-
yeah.
What
yeah,
happened
yeah.
to the idea
Yeah.
that
That making
business,
money is
that
good.
business contributes the jobs
This whole
that we
Occupy,
need?
this whole
It's
Occupy
attitude.
Wall Street, and these Democrats have been supporting it. They are part of it. It is a part of their machinery to bring it in. It is all part of with the unions and them to bring that about, and they have a power and a strength with all that they have. But I think that they're losing that, because the unions are losing in many, many issues over the last 2 years. And it has nothing to do with Obama, because he was not able to stop what took place. But there's been a lot of
And
changes.
you're next.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see, I've lived through my whole life, is the fact that when I was a kid, every one of these small communities had a wigwam burner. Not that they're good or bad, it just meant that there was a sawmill there.
Mhm.
And little loggers went out and logged their patch of timber that they could buy on a fair bid from the government. And they'd take that down, obviously the closest mill, and they'd mill it. Those guys sold the lumber to local people, and everybody was happy, because those are good family wage jobs. They may not be environmentally correct, I'm not gonna argue that point, but they were good family wage jobs. Now, I've seen the small companies be absorbed by Bohemia, who was one of the biggest ones. You should read the thing on Fay Stewart and Stubb Stewart, great people. They sold out, or was absorbed by Willamette Industries, which I thought was a mega company. And then Weyerhaeuser bought them, ran them out there in adverse possession, and Willamette Industries gone. Well, then we don't have these guys. I'd love to see Walport have a little sawmill. I'd like to see Florence and Newport have some sawmills. Bring the timber in here, where we don't expend all the fossil fuel and trucking everything to the Willamette Valley, manufacturing the product, and then bringing it back over here.
Or
It's
taking
crazy.
it down to Goose Bay and sending it, putting it on a boat.
Yeah.
Send it overseas.
I sold
Yeah.
some timber here a few years back.
10 miles off
They
the
trucked it all the
coast.
way to Longview and sold it to Japan. They had some big cedar on there. Like, holy moly, probably $480 a load to truck it up there. But let's get things back. You know, let's get.
I have
We had an urbanization. Let's have a ruralization of these jobs again. So.
I have a question, because I've been grappling with this, and I'm not seeing exactly what I ought to be seeing yet, so I would want to hear from you on this. there are multiple proposals regarding the O&C lands. One of them is just the federal government has the capacity, supposedly, is the way this argument goes, to give the lands to the state of Oregon. You hear me? State, okay? Not private, but to the state. Another philosophy and approach that some are taking, and I'm going to ask you to critique this because I want to hear what you say, is to have the feds be able to lease those lands. And then from that leasing, that would be paid for by private industry, as it would be regained for them as they sell the timber from that land. And the only federal land that would be out of the picture there would be where there's a military base or an Indian reservation or something like that. That kind of, either one of those kinds of approaches would be appealing really only to those of us on the West Coast, because we're the ones with so much federal land. Whereas back in, I don't know which states, Connecticut, New York, whatever, they may have 2 to 5%. Nevada has over 90%. We've got 53% and 60% of our forest lands in federal ownership. Now, do either of those plans make any sense, or is there something better? Because it's clearly, it's got to be just totally different than the way it is right now in order to get our counties back on track. Because we are, to have those county roads deteriorate is terrible.
You can't log it.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
So there's a problem.
Yeah.
If the states take it over and they can do away with the frivolous lawsuits, now it takes, I think, about 5 years to do the environmental impact statement to log before they patch timber. And just a huge amount of resources that go into an environmental impact statement with all the endangered species of
Yeah.
flora and fauna that exist. And then you get into watershed things because a lot of people don't want you logging it over 60% slope. And I want to tell you, there's a lot of property around here that's over 60% slope. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand those issues, but it ultimately adds to the cost of homes for everybody that's
And I hear you, and that's really regulatory that would probably affect whoever owned the land, correct? So that kind of thing is part of
If the
it.
state owns it, I think they could cut through part of that.
And do you, I'm going to ask something really sacrilegious. Do you trust the state of Oregon?
No.
No,
Well, for the administration we've had for the last 20 years, not so much, but,
Well, then should it be private or no?
well, originally the ONCs were private. Those properties were given to the railroads to help pay for the thing, and then somehow they got absorbed back into the system when the railroads didn't sell them, I guess. But,
they should work in
Is it
frivolous
Karen?
lawsuits that stop people from doing things and make the people who bring them have to pay.
that's another real problem, because the environmental groups that bring on those lawsuits are paid by the government,
Exactly.
reimbursed by them.
Then they should find out.
That's really,
MoveOn.org and all the
Sierra Club and,
environmentalist groups.
Sierra Club and National, 1,000 Friends of Oregon.
Well, if they start to have to pay for it, and they don't have any money right now, they're gonna have to stop that.
One
mean,
more,
they shouldn't.
one more comment, and we're at the end of our time, and I want us to wrap up then.
Karen is on a tight schedule.
Well, and I'm
Yeah.
cognizant of your time too. This is after all Friday.
Kelly Hockema, he ran for county commissioner 2 years ago, and he really is very much aware of the lumber industry in
Very
throughout the state.
knowledgeable, very
And spent a
knowledgeable.
lot of time, that's a
Family,
name that
so.
you probably ought to have, it's Kelly Hockema, and I'm sure he would be glad to meet with you and talk with
And
you.
as Steve said, he ran for county commissioner 2 years ago.
If you need additional information on how to get a hold of him, email me and I'll be glad to get it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I've actually corresponded with him
Oh,
several
you have,
along the
okay,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's a little rough, but he's very
He
knowledgeable.
sure knows timber and.
Yeah,
and
He's
that
timber.
he's a
His-
fifth generation logging family.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
fan.
And a lot of
Yeah.
they lost.
Well, one of the things I do is advise businesses on a volunteer basis for how to grow and expand and be innovative and get loans and whatever they need to do. And one of them that I'm working with real closely right now wants to serve the lumber firms that are around. So as a process of that, I've really enjoyed that because
Yeah.
it brought me a little closer. That may have been when I contacted Kelly, I'm not sure. I do think it's time to conclude, in part because of moving on down the road, but mostly because I'm respectful of your time. What I appreciate about time with you like tonight is your openness, your honesty. It's just fun to be with you. I've got to say that one of my heartwarming moments was when someone from a little bit further north on the coast put on his Facebook page, please know that Karen Bowerman is one of us.
Yeah.
And I love that comment. I can't even tell you how much, because I'm not a fisherman. You know, I'm not from the timber industry, but I have a heart for our economic prosperity, and if, you know, to the extent, and it's huge, that that's the way for us to get there, by golly, there is a responsibility to understand it and love it and make it come closer to being where it needs to be. I don't pretend to be able to go in and just, you know, like magic, do something. But I want you to know that I am totally committed to finding the good people to work with in Congress, and there are some, and to partner with them and to really work some of these things through for our section of Oregon would just be an absolute thrill. And I hope that by being together this evening, you get a sense of who I am. And if you feel that you can trust me, I feel one of the most horrible things about Congress right now is lack of integrity and lack of trust. And if you sense any trust and see that as a positive change, thank you, because that's where I am as a person. So when you see on the front of the white side of my little page there, that courage and integrity are a part of how I describe who I am. That's the way I see myself. That's how in my career I've always gotten feedback on the way I am. Even when people disagreed with me, and believe me, in working with faculty, there were many ways in which we disagreed, even in working with the business community. But they would know where they stood relative to the leadership that I brought, to the efforts that we had. I've been really proud of the accomplishments that I've had in higher education with the business community, to include, and I don't believe I mentioned this earlier, being named one of the 18 most innovative colleges of business in the world. And that occurred 3 months before I retired. And that came about because of particular programs we did that benefited the region and the businesses in that region, and brought students and managers into preparedness for working with those businesses. So that kind of practical thinking, just maybe simple is the word, is what I'd like to see restored. So that's a little bit about who I am. And I gotta tell you, your support will be terrific. If you want to take another 10 signs with you, please have them.
There, yeah, I'm gonna get some signs.
And if there is...
I still have about 15 in my basement.
Oh, let's get those out, Don.
Do you want to go
We got
over
about 6 or
email?
7 out from our meeting last night, so next time you come back, you'll see some more out there.
Great.
Yeah.
I've got support envelopes. If any of you wish to give them to a friend, take them yourself. I'll pass them this way. Whatever you would like to do to help with the campaign, believe me, I would be ever so grateful. So have
I
another...
appreciate you listening, you know, and I think that's great. And that
We appreciate
there's
your
obviously a lot
presence,
more
too.
knowledgeable people about specific things than all sitting here, but
I'm gonna grab
I think,
Okay, they're at the
you
bottom.
know, we're tired of going.
So I can kind of grab some of these as they go out.
Yeah.
I guess, you know.
I am
I
too.
could get into the wolf issue big time, but that's
Well, somewhere along the line, I heard that this was a country that was for the people. By the people. Wasn't there something like that?
Revolutionary.
It started that way,
And,
but that president we have now doesn't understand that language.
but you know what? You are the people. I
Yep,
am the
yep.
people.
Yep.
And I'm sure we can expect to see you again after the primary.
Yes, I hope so.
She does have an opponent in the primary, but I think Karen is a very good bet to win.
You have no problem with that point.
Yeah,
Well,
no, Steve's not real fond of that.
With your votes, that will be the
Yeah.
case.
Well,
So
we
thank you
like
very much.
business
No
people.
problem.
Because
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can tell from your comments.
You're part of a very good group of candidates. We have some excellent people on the ballot. From Secretary of State, from the Labor Commissioner, who actually won't be on the ballot for the primary because he got screwed off and he has to run in November instead. He's not happy about it, thanks to the incumbent Secretary of State, by the way. And Scott Roberts running for District 9 Senate out of North Bend, I believe he is. And of course, Newt running for Secretary of State.
And I'd like to echo particularly on Newt. And
Newt-
Emily.
Newt's
He's
fantastic.
another businessman.
Yes.
Newt's fantastic.
He is, a
I
businessman.
think he has a legitimate
I
chance.
sold him
to
his
win.
oceanfront house in Walport.
He told
And
me
a
about that
restaurant.
house, but I didn't
And
know.
all the residents.
Holly, how are
Well,
you?
it's good to meet you. I appreciate your big picture.
Well, I was at your,
Supporting back.
Holly, how you doing? Are you still